All right, welcome back. If you're wondering why I'm always looking this way, that's because that's where the controls for the video is. So I apologize if you constantly have to look at the right side of my face. But in any event, let's get on with this next chapter. This is examples of lender protection and terms. I'm going to read from the text, and then I'm going to comment. Personal guarantees are just that, a personal guarantee. Not only is the property and your purchasing entity serving as security for the loan, but the pledging of your personal assets is now included as well. This means if you own your personal home with your wife, she may be required to sign a promissory note too. In some states, a creditor can't establish a lien on one's homestead, but in others, if you default on the investment property, you might have issues with the home you live in as well. So the moral of the story is, don't miss a payment. Don't miss a payment to your private lender. I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. If you think you're gonna be tardy with a payment, call the lender in advance. Don't write him a check and hope it don't bounce. Let him know early. But I will tell you that if you miss a payment or you stress making a payment, even if you call them, this is more likely than not going to be the last time they loan you money. Because remember, they're tethered to this money. It's their nest egg. Unless you have a long history of deals with this lender already, and this is just a bump in the road, and you can clearly explain to the lender what happened, that you have no cash flow to make his payment, unless you got all those things going for you, this is the last loan with that guy. That's all there is to it. Don't cry about it. Just move on. I'm going to get back to the text. Eventually, a personal guarantee won't be required by most of your private lenders, but until you reach that point, keep your lender current. Even after, when you don't have to sign personally anymore, you still keep your lender current. Because as I stated before, if you don't pay your lender, that's it. You're done with them. And it's not going to be your choice. I wish there was some magnificent advice that I could share with you here, but there's not. If you experience a setback with a property and your finances are going to get tight, look for a fix before you get into trouble. Every investor can see at least a few weeks down the road with your properties. If it's not going to close on time or your refinancing is getting delayed, figure out a way to pay your lender. Borrow on credit cards or from family members to pay your lender. Know this. Once you default on a loan, a lender will never be able to loan to you again. They can't. They won't. The closer you think you are to a lender, the more this fact should hurt you. There's not much worse than grooming a lender for 3 years and then seeing them leave you because of a default. Figure out a way to get it paid. And while that's not in the text, I'm going to tell you that this is a point that's very important. If you buy a property and you have to write a check to close it, everybody's done it. If you haven't done it yet, you haven't bought enough properties. But if you have to write a check to get it closed, that means you're not making any money on it. It's costing you money to close that thing. Do not ask the lender to contribute to your loss. Don't call them up and say, listen, Paul, I need to pay you off short because I made a bad deal. It cost me some money, and I know I borrowed 110, and I made monthly payments all along, but I'd like you to accept 100,000 as payoff because I made a bad deal. Don't do it. I discuss this again later in the training. Okay, let's go on to cross-collateralization. Cross-collateralization is a very strong security statement made by both of the parties. For the lender, it says to me anyways, Mr. Borrower, I'm not as confident as you are about this loan. Therefore, we'll need additional security in order to make it. And from the borrower, it says, I'm so confident in my ability to make money from this transaction, I'm willing to over-secure you, sir. Personally, I've never been a real big fan of cross-collateralization, but then again, I've never made one real estate loan. Cross-collateralization provides the lender with an additional security for a given loan by the borrower posting additional properties in exchange for the loan. For example, if you own 3 other properties that are listed on the cross-collateralization agreement, those other properties would act as additional security for your loan. Should the borrower default on the subject loan, the other properties listed in the agreement would immediately become liable for repayment of the subject loan. This document has pretty sharp teeth. Yet I prefer this to personal guarantees. And the reason is simply this. I made a promise to my wife many years ago that I would never expose our home where we live in with our children to any potential liability. You might feel differently. But that's the agreement I made. Now, none of this ugliness ever comes to fruition unless and until you miss a payment. If you haven't had the chance to read my 10 Commandments of Real Estate Investing, here's a particularly fitting excerpt. And note that it is commandment number 1. Never allow your lender to take a loss. What this means is that every real estate investor will eventually have to write a check in order to get a deal closed. I just talked about that. And when you do, don't ever ask your lender to share or contribute to your loss. If your lender wanted to assume the risks involved in real estate investing, they would. But they chose to reduce their risk by lending money to professional real estate investors instead. So the moral of the story is, if you make a mess, clean it up yourself. As an aside, when you do take that hit, you take that loss, your lender will be watching you very closely to see how you react to it. Never ask for a discount, and never let your lender see you sweat. So this is one of those things. Your children are always watching you and the way you react to bad news. Your lender is doing the same thing. All right, let's go move on to assignment of rents. Assignments of rents are a standard provision in every mortgage document that I've ever seen. It provides that the borrower, if they should default, the lender would immediately be entitled to collect and receive any rent due from the occupants of the subject property. It's pretty standard. It doesn't, however, provide that rent needs to be paid if it's not currently rented. As I stated before, this is a standard provision, so just get accustomed to seeing it. Assignment of rents means that if the property's rented, your lender wants to collect the rent because they're not collecting mortgage payments. It's fair enough. It seems like a fair exchange, and it is. And you're not going to be able to cross it out of your mortgage anyways, so at least now you know what it means, and you're not going to be caught by surprise when it goes into effect. Again, all this mess can be avoided. Just don't miss your payments. Okay, I think I beat the hay out of that pretty good. Let's move on to the next slide. See you there.